Hey, welcome to your astrology forecast for the week of Monday, May 12th through Sunday, May 18th, 2025. This week, as you probably know, is significant because there is a full moon at the start of the week. That is probably the most major event here. But there are some themes kind of building with a new, well, not a new fire focus, but we've had a lot of fire planets all year, really. But we're starting. The plants are hinting at like a new yang focus. Okay, so I know that may sound a little bit odd to say in the middle of Taurus season when we have this Scorpio moon, right? Taurus is yin, it's earth. Scorpio is also yin, it's water. But in the background, we still have multiple planets in Aries. We've got Mars and Leo. Moon will be transiting through Sagittarius this week as well. And then, really, the reason why I'm saying all this is because later this month, we will have Sun and Mercury entering Gemini, concluding Taurus season, and then also Saturn leaving Pisces and entering Aries. So that's why I'm talking about this now. Really, with this combination of multiple Aries planets, but also Taurus season, Taurus Sun, Taurus Mercury, etc., Taurus Uranus. I really think we're building something new. With this combination of fire and earth in general, we're really constructing something very new, which on the one hand, that's not entirely unusual for this type of year. This time of year, we always have Sun in Taurus, and it's not totally unusual to have a few other planets hanging around in fire signs. The difference, though, is that we have the outer planets gradually transitioning to yang signs as well. So that's why I think it's so important to pay attention to this. What are you building in your life? Whether you know it or not, you are building something, you're constructing something new. Fire and earth, in my opinion, are the two most productive elements when it comes to building something new in a very literal way, like straightforward way. Building a new life, building a new career, building a new empire, whatever it is for you. Maybe it's building a relationship or a family structure. I don't know what you're doing, but we are all building something new in our own lives. So that's my take on the combination of Aries and Taurus here. The Scorpio full moon I'll talk more about once we get to the day by day forecast. The last thing I want to mention before we dive in is this week we also have some pretty funky Jupiter aspects. Jupiter is slow enough that it is generally rare for it to initiate aspects, and so that is going to be some really interesting stuff to unpack at the end of this forecast. That'll come this coming weekend. But let's get into the day by day forecast. I'm going to be really transparent. I'm trying a new layout. It probably looks the same to you, but it is different to me. Basically, the only difference is it's allowing me to kind of draw on here. So hopefully that'll be a little more engaging so I can show you what I'm talking about. So here, this is what I draw for this full moon. So starting out Monday, May 12th, 2025, we have a full moon at 22 degrees Scorpio. Here it's showing 21 because I always use noon for each day. When I show the chart for each day, I always use noon Eastern time. So technically, the full moon is just afternoon Eastern time. But basically, you will feel this full moon all day. And I was thinking about this full moon. So when it comes to the aspects, I think the aspects for the full moon are not really the major focal point in my personal opinion. There are a couple minor aspects. So this full moon, 22 Scorpio, it does make a pretty exact quincunx to Jupiter at 23 Gemini. But the quincunx is a minor aspect, so it's not something that's going to be totally overwhelming. There's also a very loose trine that the full moon makes to Saturn. So full moon at, again, 22 Scorpio, trining. I mean, really loosely trining, though. It's about 5 degrees away from that trine to Saturn at 28 Pisces, almost 29 Pisces. So really, the aspects, both of these aspects are not a big deal. I did want to bring them up just to be thorough, but really, I would say the Scorpio full moon itself, regardless of the aspects, just the full moon, opposing the Sun in Taurus, that alone is pretty impactful because Why is that? Well, I think the sun is pretty powerful in Taurus. Sun is, building. It's in this middle spring sign of Taurus. That means this is one of the times of the year where the light is like increasing the fastest, right? It's increasing faster and faster. There's more and more light, especially if you are at those northern latitudes right now. So the sun is very powerful in Taurus. And then moon is in a very strange place in Scorpio. Moon is in fall there. It's debilitated. So moon is challenged there. But I always say, I think when we're learning a new concept, we want to know, is this good or bad? And it's not exactly that simple. I think people who are just getting into astrology may think of a placement like moon in Scorpio as bad, like it might be weak or, it's challenged. Um, but that's not entirely true. It is challenged there. This may be hard, for those that are born with moon in Scorpio, or for us as we experience this full moon. Yes, this might be more challenging than other full moons. However, it's not fair to say that this is all bad or that it's all weak or it's all um, moon in Scorpio can be very powerful, and that it's not unique. Most debilitated placements have some kind of superpower, as I say. There's always some kind of like hidden weakness or really the way I would characterize it is any kind of debilitated placement is going to be outside of the box. So it more has to do with like countercultures and thinking for yourself. And that's why, yeah, those themes are more difficult, but it can also be so rewarding. Like I do a lot of work with birth charts and natal charts, and getting to know natal charts can help you to understand transits like this as well. So for instance, knowing someone with Scorpio moon or knowing someone with a lot of debilitated placements in general, people with debilitated placements are going to be more humble, but they're also going to have really unique opinions. It's because they think for themselves. They grew up maybe not always being part of like the norm or the status quo. They were different in some way. They may have not been accepted. They may have had to go through some kind of challenge alone, if that makes sense. So with that experience, it just makes, in my opinion, it makes them very interesting to talk to and to see kind of their point of view, because they always have such a unique point of view. So what does that have to do with this full moon? Basically, this full moon will show you some kind of new perspective. And for more information on how that applies to you personally, you can look to 22 degrees Scorpio in your chart. What house is that? You don't have to be a master astrologer to just apply, to just look at, where is 22 Scorpio in your chart? What house is that? You can use whatever house system you prefer. Is that is that at the top of your chart? Well, that's a big deal. That means that you're going to be shown something new, some kind of new action or insight when it comes to your career and your public image. If it's your first house, that's probably even a bigger deal. That means you yourself, you're going through something on your own, some kind of transformation with yourself. But whatever house it's in, you can apply some kind of new awakening, new insight, and also having to think for yourself as well in that part of your life on and around this full moon. It's really that simple, and I hope I'm making it simple. If you do have any questions, you can always comment or email me. I always put my information in the description. But yeah, so the Scorpio full moon has really stood out to me the past several years, especially when it comes to like shining a light, shining a flashlight. I forget who it was that because I'm using someone else's terms. They told me this personally. But the Scorpio full moon, the light is being shown from the sun, right? Because the sun lights up the moon. So the sun in Taurus is shining this flashlight into Scorpio, and that's why it's so exciting, because Scorpio, more than any other sign, is all about like solving mysteries, right? And shining the light, becoming conscious in areas that previously were unconscious, right? Making the dark illuminated so that we can understand it and become familiar with it, right? That's what Scorpio is all about. So that's why this full moon is so exciting. I really encourage you to look to that part of your chart to understand how this will affect you personally and what kind of insights you could expect. The only aspect, honestly, that might be more relevant would be Uranus. The sun is kind of honing in on a conjunction to Uranus. Sun will pass Uranus later this week. So the full moon at 22 Scorpio, it is, 4 degrees away from opposing Uranus. So somewhat close. I really think it's kind of a gray area. It's kind of a spectrum of like exactly what orb you want to use for aspects, but I think 4 degrees away is definitely enough to consider, especially because Uranus and Scorpio have a connection as well. Scorpio is the sign of Uranus's exaltation. So, moon in Scorpio, especially a full moon in Scorpio, it does actually resonate with certain themes that are similar to Uranus. So, both Uranus and Scorpio have to do with countercultures and breakthroughs. Both can be very stable energies, but then they have to do with like earthquakes, right? So both Scorpio and Uranus may be stable for a long time, and then they they tend to relate to themes that have to do with sudden change, sudden epiphanies, or sudden awakenings, right? So that kind of just doubles down on that theme even more. So again, I'd really encourage you to look to those points in your chart, and expect the unexpected. That's probably true for any full moon, but especially a full moon in Scorpio, especially a full moon loosely opposing Uranus. There's gonna be some kind of breakthrough, some kind of earthquake, so to speak. Could even be a literal earthquake, but I'm mostly speaking as an analogy, of course. Some kind of earthquake with your insight, your awareness, you may have a new idea, a new feeling, a new perspective, and it's going to be something very individualistic. It's not something that other people are expecting you to see it this way, or you feel like you're just going along with emotions. This is going to be something very personal to you, that you're figuring something out, you're becoming aware of something new. And if you're listening to this channel, you're probably all about that, about these like new insights and awakenings. So you have that to look forward to. On a less intense note, Mercury will be squaring Pluto. I don't know if I'm still like playing around with this whole paint thing, so forgive me if this is a little awkward at first, but Mercury does square Pluto today. This is going to be a pretty quick aspect. Mercury is cruising right now. It's going over 1 degree per day at this point. So this is brief, and honestly, I think this is kind of it's more of a background energy for today. The full moon is, by far, it really takes the show away, not only for today, but really for the whole week. So this Mercury squaring Pluto, it's in the background. It's going to be more relevant to you if you have placements around 3 degrees of the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. That's where, if you do have placements around there, then this whole Mercury square Pluto thing will be a much greater deal to you than everyone else. Otherwise, I think the rest of us are going to mostly be distracted by the full moon. The only other exception too would be if you have, like, let's say Mercury is super strong in your chart, or maybe Pluto is really strong in your chart, then this aspect would be more relevant for you as well. Mercury squaring Pluto, in a weird way, I think it's actually a little bit similar. It also indicates a new kind of awakening or a new awareness. This new awareness could be painful or uncomfortable. You might be aware of some kind of, maybe some darker truths, like kind of looking at the dark side of things. But sometimes, again, it's about like kind of shining the light into the darkness. The dark is not always evil. Sometimes we can learn a lot there, like looking at our own insecurities, for example. Like that's what I've observed usually comes up for myself and others with Pluto aspects, which, is that always fun? Is that exciting? No, but it can be, necessary. Pluto, in a lot of ways, Pluto reminds me of Saturn. It kind of has to do with, like dealing with these things that we don't always want to deal with, cleaning things up, polishing things up, refining things. So this aspect could have to do with that for a lot of people as well. And I did want to mention, Moon makes the exact opposition to Uranus late Monday night, at least Eastern time. So again, it might be like early Tuesday for some time zones, or sometime on Monday. But for some time, depending on where you are, Moon will make that exact opposition to Uranus later. So it's almost like a 1-2 punch. Like at some time on Monday, there's that exact full moon, so peak intensity there. But then there's this like second kind of punch, so to speak, late Monday or maybe very early Tuesday. So I just thought that was interesting. So you could have like multiple realizations. There could be like a secondary sort of event or a secondary wave of energy, in no uncertain terms, for sure. Okay, let's look at Tuesday, May 13th. So today Moon does leave. Well, and again, So I believe it's very early in the morning, Tuesday Eastern time. Moon leaves Scorpio and enters Sagittarius. I honestly think this is nice. Like right after having a full moon, when the moon enters the next sign, it's kind of nice to like have a little bit of distance from that full moon, so to speak. So it looks like whatever we're realizing on Monday, it happens really fast. There's this really sudden, unexpected like wave of energy. I'm picturing it like a lightning strike. It kind of just zaps you out of nowhere. You have this new awakening, and then we very quickly move on. And Tuesday is going to feel very different. So it's a lot of change happening really quickly. But Tuesday may feel a little bit more loose. There's a huge difference going from the full moon in Scorpio to moon entering Sagittarius. Scorpio is one of the most kind of cynical, dark, pessimistic signs, and I would say Sagittarius is the most optimistic sign. So that is a huge difference with the moon leaving Scorpio and entering Sagittarius. Part of that too is moon, like I was talking about, moon debilitated in Scorpio. That's ending now as moon enters Sagittarius. So I think things will become a little lighter, and this really sets a much different tone that will persist for most of this week, at least for like the middle of this week. And what I mean by that is with moon in Sagittarius, not only is that, very different than how it was in Scorpio, it's also very different because now moon is agreeing with all these other fire planets. So we've got Neptune, Venus, and Chiron in Aries, Mars in Leo, and then moon in Sag. So suddenly we have this like huge fire dominated chart. We already had more fire planets we already had more planets in fire signs than any other element, but with the moon there, the luminaries control so much. The luminaries are way more powerful than the planets, in my opinion, at least with like day-to-day experience. So with moon joining the fire team, so to speak, it really dominates everything there. So let's talk about fire. If you're listening to this, you probably already know generally what the fire element is, but for the next few days, it's fiery, right? So it's action oriented. It's new things happening. Part of this is going to have to do with the shakeup that starts on Monday, right? So it's not a coincidence that there's some kind of new awareness and awakening on Monday, and then for the rest of the week, there's all these fiery themes. Moon in Sagittarius is a little out of character, right? It's wanting us to play and to explore and to adventure. Usually the moon is more comfortable in these kind of homey, cozy, more complacent signs. But Sagittarius is so adventure oriented. So it's suggesting that we're all more adventure oriented. And again, this yang focus, it's going to be something that, we're becoming more and more familiar with. It's going to be something that really hits us hard as we enter Gemini season and we have Saturn enter Aries. And I'm sure that's not going to be the last time that I like warn you, not like it's a bad thing, but it's not going to be the last time that I let you know about this huge change, because it's just such a huge change. I'm forgetting to like use my cursors, my new little tools. There we go. So all these fire planets, right? Fire. And it is interesting, right? Because we are in the middle of Taurus season. So Taurus, I'm viewing Taurus as almost like an outlier. Like Sun is in Taurus. Sun wants to set the stage or set the tone, right? Sun wants to be the leader and like the center of everything, right? But with this chart, I just think Sun as well as Mercury's following the Sun as it tends to do. But I just think, I don't know, there's almost like a disconnect there. There's a discrepancy. We are in Taurus season. Depending on your latitude, Taurus can be the most beautiful part of spring. It's very harmonious. It's very stable. It's stable growth, right? So we still do have that. Sun is in Taurus. That's not, just because there's the other fire planets doesn't mean that that's not true. However, it's being like bombarded and almost overwhelmed by all these fire energies as well. But there is a complementary nature there, with fire. I think I mentioned this in the intro. Adding the fire planets to Taurus is so essential for constructing something new. We've got the stable growth, the solidarity, the follow through of Taurus, but then also adding in all this like really creative spark of energy, this Mars in Leo is so proud and so strong, right? And it's fighting energy. It will not stop fighting for whatever it believes in. So we can all feel a little bit more like that. Moon in Sagittarius, very open, very dreaming and imaginative, and it's just ready for any kind of adventure. And then adding in these 3 Aries planets as well. So individualistic, so also so ready for the new action, the new adventure, the new project. So adding in the fire energy with the Taurus planets, Taurus season is it's going to be very interesting. I think for many of us this may be a little bit chaotic, but on the other hand, again, as I keep saying, it's going to be very productive, really great for building some kind of new world, new focus, etc. Okay, let's look at Wednesday the 14th. So Wednesday the 14th, honestly, the chart looks pretty similar to me. Only difference is that like Moon is kind of crossing through like the halfway point of Sagittarius. And so as it does so kind of earlier in the day, it will trine Mars in Leo, and it's actually making kind of a grand trine to Venus in Aries as well. So again, it's like this fire dominance that I was talking about starting on Tuesday. It ramps up even more on Wednesday as we get these trines, or even kind of a grand trine, depending on what orb you use. Moon, Venus, and Mars are basically making a grand trine. It's not exact like to the degree, but it's definitely close enough that, how do I put this? Like, I can't imagine a more optimistic energy than a fire grand trine, because you got 3 trines. They're all fire energies. So, the trines are the easiest and most harmonious elements. And then fire is the most expansive, most optimistic, right? So it's like, if you really want easy energy when it comes to starting something, building something, instigating something, taking action, this is it. This is a lot. It's a lot. And it's really cluing in. It's cluing in. It's really triggering our desires, with Venus, Mars, and the Moon. One thing in common that all 3 of these have is they have a lot to do with our desires and what we want and how we feel. Like, how do you feel and what do you want, right? All 3 of these planets have to do with that. So with all 3 of these trining and fire signs, we may be very confident, maybe even too confident about what we want. We may be individualistic and even maybe a little bit selfish at times. So depending on who you are, depending on your chart and your preferences, this may be exactly what you need, or it could be a little bit, maybe over the top. If you're already a little bit individualistic or impulsive, this could just be enabling. This could, be a little dangerous or reckless for you. But if you're someone who's a little bit more timid, if you're someone who wants to explore, wants to break out of your shell, but you may sometimes have trouble doing so, or if sometimes maybe you don't always know what you want, then this could be exactly what the doctor ordered, so to speak. Like, this could be exactly what it takes to figure out what you want and to have the boldness to go out there and to go get it. And again, it's all in the name of building something new. That's really what it's about. Let's look at Thursday. So Thursday, honestly, like the whole middle of the week is like one chapter in my head. Because again, you've got Moon in Sag. This is changing though now. Thursday, Moon will leave Sag and enter Capricorn. So again, it's going to be a big shift. Really, Moon has kind of a bumpy time in all of these kind of like fall and winter signs. Moon and fall in Scorpio, and then Moon and Sag can be really fun, but it's also a little bit out of place. And then Moon will be in detriment in Capricorn. So yeah, it's a little bit of an awkward time, but again, these more out of place energies, sometimes we have to be out of place in order to appreciate things, to understand things, or to have a like more of an individual perspective, right? So there is that silver lining there. But there's not a whole lot of aspects lately. So I'm just going to continue on to Friday. And we'll talk more about Moon in Capricorn for Friday. And again, like I said, Moon entered Capricorn Thursday, but then Moon is in Capricorn all day Friday and all day Saturday as well, for depending most of your time zones. Okay, so this is different. We still have, the three fire planets in Aries, Mars in Leo. That's not changing this week. We've still got the three planets in Taurus. Now with Moon in Capricorn, so now things the way I see it, instead of having this huge fire focus with Taurus as kind of like a afterthought, now I see this as much more balanced, right? Because although there are still more fire planets than Earth planets, again, the sun and the moon really dominate everything so much. They have so much influence, and so with both the sun and the moon starting to agree now, both of them in Earth signs. Now I think things are weighted a little bit more evenly when it comes to Earth versus fire. I feel like I'm really neglecting the air and water signs this week because there's just so little action going there. But with astrology, I'm always looking for patterns, right? I'm looking to like what's the theme, what's the pattern, and this week the pattern is fire, and then later in the week it is earth to some extent as well. So again, it is fire and earth. It's still very constructive, building something new, having the follow through of earth, but the inspiration and optimism of fire. It's just that things are a little bit more grounded. They actually may be a lot more grounded as we wrap up the week here and enter Friday. Moon in Capricorn is in detriment again, so a little bit similar to Moon in Scorpio. We may feel a little emotionally restless or out of place with Moon in Capricorn. We may not know exactly what to do with our own kind of emotions. And yeah, so that is dysfunctional. However, again, Moon will start to trine first Mercury and then the Sun. So Friday, Moon makes this trine to Mercury about noon Eastern time, and then Saturday, Moon will trine the Sun as well. So there is that kind of harmony there. So in other words, like we can build something new. Like if you are a person who's more grounded, more practical, maybe you have more Earth in your chart. Both the luminaries are agreeing with you here. So you can, even if you don't have a lot of Earth signs in your chart, this chart is supporting you in building something new, being very grounded and practical, but also wanting to infuse some a certain spark there, a certain like passion there. Okay, let's look at Saturday. So Saturday is similar, and there aren't a whole lot of aspects. However, there is Sun. I'm just circling the moon because the moon is always a focal point. But Sun does conjoin Uranus today. So I'm really viewing this as like a sequence, right? So going back to Monday again, we had that full moon. Moon was sort of opposing Uranus, but not exactly. The next day, Moon did exactly oppose Uranus. And then now, at the end of the week on Saturday, Sun conjoins Uranus. So I'm viewing all three of those as part of the same like process, if that makes sense. So in other words, Saturday there will likely be some kind of huge shakeup, some kind of earthquake. There could be a change with stocks, finances, values, commodities. Could also be a change with the earth. So some kind of natural process, natural event, natural disaster. Hopefully not, but that it could be that. In our own personal lives, it could be a lot of like some kind of new epiphany or awakening, some kind of new perspective, especially with whatever house or planet is around 27 Taurus in your chart. Okay. But again, whatever that new awakening is or whatever that new event is, it may be something that actually started on Monday or Tuesday, or it's related. There's the sequence of events. Something really got instigated on Monday and or Tuesday, and then now there's this kind of secondary event or like third kind of event that's part of that same series, if that makes sense. So that may help you to look at it that way. But that's by far the main event for the day. Other than that, we still have those, several planets and fire signs, and then Moon and Capricorn for Saturday. Okay, and then lastly, let's look at Sunday. So Sunday, I mentioned in the intro, Jupiter does some pretty funky stuff, and that's what we get to on Sunday. Real quick before that, Moon does leave Capricorn and enters Aquarius, and as it does so, it passes over Pluto. So that's gonna feel very dark for a lot of us, especially if you have Moon very strong in your chart, or if you have placements around 3 degrees Aquarius. You may feel you may feel a lot. You may feel maybe more aware, kind of hyper aware, in more of a survival mentality. You may also be more aware of your insecurities, or like darker. You may have a darker kind of outlook. So if that does happen, just know that it is temporary. This will, fortunately with the moon is so fast. This aspect will only last for a few hours, really. But that is worth mentioning for sure. Okay, and I want to save Jupiter for last. There's one other thing I want to mention. So Mercury squares Mars today as well. So my notes show, yeah, that makes sense. So early in the day, Mercury actually at 13 Taurus will square Mars at 13 Leo. It's not an exact square that I drew, but you get what I'm trying to say. Hopefully. So Mercury at 13 Taurus squaring Mars at 13 Leo. I think this really just encapsulates everything I've been saying for this week. Mercury's still in Taurus. It's saying, hey, let's be grounded. Let's think things through. Let's be super practical. Let's only do what makes sense to us. Taurus is actually a very intuitive sign. So Mercury in Taurus is kind of saying, like, let's not get too mentally wrapped up in something unless it kind of intuitively makes sense to us. Like, let's stay logical. Let's stay grounded. Let's approach things kind of slowly and in a steady way. Let's be productive, but in a grounded way. Let's not rush things, right? So Mercury is in that energy, and it's butting heads with Mars. Mars in Leo also wants to be stable and consistent, but it is much more fiery, much more passionate, very proud. It's much more inclined to like start something new, and it's Mars in Leo is a very excitable energy, very excited, but its excitement is stable though. It's very consistent. So these two energies clashing, I think. Squares are tense for sure, and this may feel tense for a lot of us, but I don't think the square is actually the worst aspect. I don't think it's the hardest aspect. Both of these energies are in fixed signs, so it's not that they have nothing in common whatsoever. It's more that these energies are both stubborn, and so they're both clashing. But we can use this. We can use so what I was saying all week, or for all of this week's forecast, is that Mercury in Taurus, Mars in Leo, if you can combine both of those, you'll be basically unstoppable, right? If you can use Taurus's consistency, its pragmaticism, and its work ethic, and then combine that with Mars and Leo, which is has a lot more energy and excitement, right? More passion. Combining fire and earth is so powerful. So this could be a tense day for a lot of us, but it could also be extremely productive. Especially when it comes to the follow through. So in other words, this could be about initiating something new, but I think for a lot of us, it may be about like, let's add some energy, let's add some follow through to some projects that we already have going. Like, let's really take that to the next level. Let's bring it to stage 2 or what have you. Let's add some more depth, add some more excitement, add some more work ethic, whatever the project needs. This aspect should be able to provide. Okay, but then lastly, let's talk about Jupiter. So Jupiter, let me erase some of this nonsense here. Okay, so Jupiter, I'm playing around with these tools. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm going to keep this layout. Let me know if it helps for me to like draw on the chart, or if you're fine with me doing it the old way. I know a lot of you kind of just listen to this while you do other things and you don't even like watch the video, and that's totally fine too. Just let me know how I can kind of assist you to make your experience better, because I'm working on trying to improve the channel here. Anyway, Jupiter is at 25 Gemini all day. I think it's entering 25 degrees Gemini today, and as it does so, it makes multiple aspects. So for one, it makes a sextile to Chiron at 25 Aries. Okay. And then at the basically the same time, Jupiter also squares the lunar nodes. So the lunar nodes are at 24, 25. I've seen different calculations for these, but 24, 25 of Virgo and Pisces. So that's really interesting. Again, this is very rare because Jupiter is slow enough that it doesn't generally initiate aspects. Usually it's Mercury, it's definitely the moon, but Mercury, Venus, Mars, definitely the sun as well, initiating aspects. So it is rare, especially for Jupiter to, coincidentally, it's initiating these two aspects at the same exact time. Jupiter sextiling Chiron suggests some kind of new communication. We're really opening up some kind of trauma or something very heavy that's been burdening us for a long time. We may suddenly have a more optimistic outlook on, or we may be more able to be civil, diplomatic, or communicative about those things. We may be able to be a little bit more analytical or detached about those things. And that could be maybe exactly what's needed. Sometimes if we get really tense and frustrated and angry, maybe it's for a good reason, but sometimes we're not, seeing the greater picture. So I think Jupiter and Gemini with this sextile could be a really beautiful energy for that. Also, at the same time, Jupiter squaring the nodes indicates that we are at a certain kind of turning point, especially as a people, so to speak, or as a society. And I know that sounds weird with everything that's happening right now, but that's kind of the whole point. There is so much happening. We are at a turning point. We're not super far away from Jupiter entering Cancer, where it will be exalted. So that does suggest some kind of growth and abundance that is just around the corner. But right now with this aspect, I like to give it a shout out. Like whenever something squares the nodes, I view it as a turning point. When something is on the nodes, that's where it gets involved with the eclipses, and there's this huge like roller coaster energy. So technically speaking, a planet like Jupiter squaring the nodes, that means it's as far away as it can get from being involved in those eclipses directly like that. And so that's where it's a turning point. Does that make sense? Like we're halfway in between that kind of really intense change. So this is not as intense in comparison, but it is worth mentioning because it suggests a turning point. It suggests like a checkpoint. Like I picture it kind of like those old video games where you have like a save point or a checkpoint or whatever. It's kind of like that. It's like there's some kind of transition. There's some kind of, it's not that everything like blew up necessarily when this aspect comes along. It's more that there's just something is different. You can't quite pinpoint it. We're entering a new stage. Let's just put it that way. And this may be more, what's the word? It may be more obvious in hindsight, but I do like calling it out whenever I see something like that. But that's pretty much what I have for you for this week. So it's another weird week. We've had a couple weeks that are, it's not that there's any like huge aspects per se, but when you look at all the transits, I do think that we are experiencing a lot of change right now. And we're in the middle of some major outer planet ingressions as well. So there is a lot of big stuff happening, and I think we're all going through a lot right now. Speaking of which, next week we have Sun and Mercury entering Gemini, and then Saturn entering Aries. So huge yang focus coming in. It's going to be very action oriented, very exciting. I'm excited for it. I hope you are too. But yeah, again, I really hope this forecast helps you. Let me know. It's hard for me to take constructive criticism on my channel, but right now I really am looking for that. If you have anything you think might be useful, help me help you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, otherwise, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.